gathered a lot of
Cold,
molds and
especially down there where
that.
they didn't operate as efficiently as they do
No.
because of the coastal.
And you're right. They don't operate as efficiently there as they would as they do up here. But there's a lot of molds and funguses in them too, and that's part of the problems that she was having. And we were very fortunate when we sold it. It wasn't on the market 2 weeks, and we got the price that we were asking for. Things were selling then, and the lady that bought it had a sister in the park, and she paid cash, and we were able to, along here and with our savings and all, get
this
situated up here, and so that it was all paid when we moved in. It was all paid for. Always, you know, when you go to sell anything, homes or cars or anything, everybody wants to dicker. It's just the way of doing business, I guess. But
I hate doing that.
oh, I can't handle it. I put a fair on our Southgate property. We put a fair price on that, and we got our price. When we sold our home in Santa Fe Springs, we put a fair price on that and sold it for what people say they want a dicker. I say no, that's a fair price. I didn't add $2,000 onto it to bargain with you with. This is the price that I think it's worth. And when I sold the Mustang, the guy wanted to dicker with me. No, I sold that thing for $600, but at that time, you know, who knew that it was going to be worth $7,000 today? But when I sold the Mercury, I did the same thing. I put a fair price on it, and the guy bought it. So, didn't have any problem with that. But you're right, I don't like to dicker like that and that kind of stuff.
Did you have to do that up here?
No.
I guess you could have, but whether it would have worked or not. In those kind of situations, you don't walk away feeling good about yourself.
No. The way we got our property up here, we had been up here to see Grandma and Ruth and Clint, and Clint always liked to take you for a ride. Take you over to Black Butte Dam or up to Corning or just around, you know.
Yeah.
And so they brought us up here one time. And, oh, boy, I fell in love with this place right away, with Paradise.
Yeah.
Because it is...
Oregon.
Yeah, it's just so much... It's Oregon all over. And, of course, that's where I was raised. Till I was 12 years old. 13, I guess. Anyway, when I went and started high school. When we sold the house, I told Mom that we need to own property. We've got to own something that is ours.
That way you can build up some equity and
Fall
back on it.
Someday they're going to start raising your rent to a point that you can't afford to live here anymore. Or they're going to say, your coach is too old, you'll have to move it off of this property. One of the two. And so, that being the case, we need to own some place that we can go to. Well, about that time, and we came up here and saw this, and then about that time, Larwin, the Larwin Company, which is a development company, called and said, we would like to take you up to Northern California on a jet plane and look at some property and have a barbecue. Well, two things appealed to me. It was in the Paradise Pines, so and I liked Paradise. And number two, we'd never been on a jet, so it was an opportunity. You know, jets were pretty new at that time. We'd flown on regular commercial props, you know. And they fed us a nice breakfast on the jet coming up here. And
Big commercial jet or private? Or
yeah, it was a commercial jet.
where'd you land?
Huh?
Chico?
We landed at Chico, and then they brought us up here on a bus, and then they would take us around in a Jeep. And the roads weren't in, and
You know, I don't know if I could do that. The roads weren't in. I don't have an imagination. I can't picture. And even if I could picture, I can't believe.
well, there were some of the roads were in, but not all of them. They took us on both. They showed us the golf course and the clubhouse. You know, the clubhouse was there and all. It looked so nice.
It was already there.
Oh yeah.
That's one of the first things they have to do.
And it took us to a nice corner lot that was all cleared off. A real nice lot on the top of the hill, like, and the guy said, "Let me see what they want for it." So he called in. He said, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's sold. Somebody bought it this morning." Well, I think that lot is just a come on. But we came up here and we, you know, this is close to the. Excuse me. This is close to the clubhouse and the tennis courts and the swimming pool, and so we decided we'd take it.
Did you decide on the spot and sign on the spot, or did you go home and think about it?
No, we decided and signed, but we had to come up with some money. We had to take some money out of the credit union. It was $700 down and $70 a month. Plus another $15 for a utilities deal.
In a month?
No, the utilities was on a yearly deal. And I don't remember how much that was for the year. But we got that taken care of, and it was paid for by the time we came up here.
Oh yeah, sure.
In fact,
well before then.
yeah. And I, when we were up here one weekend, I stopped to see the district manager up here to see about going into business up here. And he said, yeah, that's possible. But you'd have to start all over. You know, I'd have to sell my business down there and then come up here. And I was 52 then, so it would have meant starting all over. And of course, you know, you're on commission, and the premiums were half as much up here as they were down there. And limited commercial, and I had quite a bit of commercial business. And it was limited commercial, and
Really rough.
I'm not sure whether fire was available then or not, because they didn't have a real good fire rating up in this area at that time. And so I decided, well, we'd sweat it out, and we even put the property up for sale at one time. Didn't sell, and boy, am I ever...
What would you have done? What was you thinking?
Moving down to Vista. Mom didn't like the idea, though she didn't really want to go to Vista because too close to the Mexican border, and she didn't want anything to do with that. Though it is a nice place to live, huh?
It worked out well coming up here.
Yeah, it's been.
The last 2 years up there. She enjoyed herself.
Oh yeah, she no doubt was happy. It was. Mom would like to have gone to Utah. Well, maybe. And of course, I had Oregon in mind, and this was a happy compromise for both of us. I don't really think she'd have been happy in Utah. Too cold.
Well.
But hey, where you live, you learn, you acclimatize.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, and it is cold, but something to be thankful about.
Well, when I got out of the service, we went to the distribution center in Arlington, which is just outside of Riverside. And it was just about this time of the year. It was in November, just
Distribution center for what?
for mustering out of the service. It was the year they had 2 Thanksgivings. Well, 1945. And they'd moved the Thanksgiving up. Why they did that, I don't know. But we had regular Thanksgiving. I was home in time for that. But the guys were getting they were going back east. We were running around in T-shirts there in Riverside, Arlington. And these guys were getting galoshes and winter underwear and winter clothing, heavy overcoat, the whole bit. And they're giving them a bad time about, they were saying we like the 4 seasons, and I understand now what they were talking about. I agree with them. I like the 4 seasons. I'm not crazy about winter, but
It's the 4th season. It's a killer.
fall,
4th season. Weather makes up.
winter, spring, summer, and fall are great. But I always told them, well, we got 4 seasons, summer, 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 and summer. It's real easy. But truthfully, even here, it's kind of nice to see the fall come. You get tired of those hot days after a while.
Yeah,
But
the thing I like about fall is the colors they use.
Yeah. The change of the weather. It's
renewal of life.
Yeah.
Cycle,
spring up here is, we get an early spring where all the blossoming, the trees, the fruit trees that blossom, and some of the flowering type plants come on, and then we get another cold spell. So as far as I'm concerned, until I see the redbud on the skyway, it ain't spring, Dad. But once that redbud comes out, from then on in, it's usually pretty good, pretty decent weather. No more cold weather, and still get some rain, but even then not too much, because the rain starts, when it rains, it knocks the bloom off the redbud. And that doesn't happen too often. But we came up here, then we used to come up here on weekend, when we come up to see Grandma and spend a few days. We always came up here and looked at our property, make sure it was still there. The guy that sold us the property said, well, you'll have no trouble. He says, when it comes time, you want to move up here to get some of these college kids in here to clear the ground off for you. And shoot, baloney, man. It cost us an arm and a leg to get this thing cleared off, get a septic tank put in, build the garage.
It wouldn't have cost you what it would have cost down below, though, would it?
No, that's probably very true.
I bet it's cheaper here than it is in Utah right now.
Oh, I don't question that at all. I don't question that at all. Things are going real cheaply here now. But the fellow that put it in, member of the church, I didn't know it at the time, but when we looked at mobiles down in town and asked people who did they get to clearing off lots here, they recommended this guy, all of them, and so we went and talked to him and got a bid from him, and most of it was handled through the mail, but
Telephone in there.
yeah, telephone and mail. And he did the work, cleared the lot, put the septic tank in, and built the garage, and I hadn't paid him 10 cents.
You must have known you were a member of the church. And you know, up in Utah,
Well,
membership in the church doesn't mean a hill of beans.
Oh, I can understand that. And it shouldn't mean anything down here either. I mean, business is business, and
Right.
In fact, sometimes I'd rather not do business with members of the church because get the idea that they think you want them to do it for nothing, or, it can cause hard feelings, and I don't want that.
No, that's right.
But in Southern California, they would have wanted anywhere from a third to a half down. Now, if I hadn't have paid him, he'd have owned the lot, which was worth, well, a lot. Well, would be worth a lot more than it cost to clear the lot and put the garage on it.
Well, when you guys decided to come up here, one of the things that I wonder about, especially, when we were looking at Montana, you come into a new area, you don't know a soul, you don't know reputable people from disreputable people. You drive by a place, in this case it would be a place that sells mobile homes. A mobile home's a mobile home's a mobile home, but it's like cars. You can buy a Hyundai or you can buy a Cadillac, and there's everything in between. And how did you? What? Butterflies.
Yeah.
Butterflies.
Well, we shopped, and Curt, by golly, we did it all in 1 week. We were up here.
Stayed with Ruth and Clint?
Huh?
We
stayed with Ruth and Clint. We were up here 1 week. We went to 3 different dealers. We saw this one first, and eventually came back to it. We were afraid for a long time that we weren't going to find what we wanted. See, this is
That's the way it is in anything.
Yeah.
Can you find what you want? Can I find the property in Montana I want for what I can afford? I'm afraid. I've tried. So far, I haven't found it.
Well, 12. This is 2 14s put together.
Yeah.
2 12s put together. Right now, you and I would be sitting in each other's lap. You see, and Mom was concerned about that. We looked and looked and looked, and of course, all this time we had been taking the local paper, the Paradise Pines Property Association put out a paper each month, and we were taking that, so we were watching in there, and when we put the stove in, we used the guy that had been advertising in the paper, and I think we got a decent deal out of it. I don't know that we got anything special, but it's turned out, well. Like I said, three distributorships
Chico?
in Chico recommended Don McDonald to do your land clearing, and he put in the septic tank and built that garage, and boy, I certainly had no complaint about it. I paid him a good price, but I think it was a competitive price.
No, I noticed noticed that your concrete's not cracked yet. For as long as you've been here,
Yeah.
that's saying something.
And the well, the house has stood up pretty good. We've been happy with it. And as far as getting acquainted, of course, there's always the church. Boy, I mean, I don't think I was up here 2 weeks, and I was just really happy that they had a ward mission leader. I could see, man, at least I wouldn't get called to that. Well, 2 weeks after we were here, the guy that had it quit, asked for release, and I was called to be ward mission leader. I didn't want that job, but I did it.
That's something we haven't talked about. One thing I don't know anything about, the first stake organized in the church, outside of the traditional areas of the Intermountain West, was organized in Southern California, Los Angeles.
Yeah, Los Angeles.
And in 1923, I think. The stake in Los Angeles was the first one outside corridor, and then after that it was split into the Huntington Park stake. The Huntington Park stake is an old thing too.
It was the East Los Angeles stake. It wasn't Huntington. It was Huntington Park Ward, but and the stake center was in Huntington Park.
Okay, yeah.
And the ward was in conjunction with the stake center, although the stake center had their own offices and their own rec hall. Huntington Park had its rec hall was down in the basement.
That's where we used to have those dinners at Uncle Art.
Yes, that's right.
Be the chef for.
That's right.
Where did you pick up that talent at?
Uncle Art was a cook in the service during World War II. World War I, I'm sorry. During World War I, and with his ability to make patterns and so forth in plastering, he was able to, a lot of times he'd lay out the quilts for the women on their quilts for Relief Society. And also when we something they did years ago that they don't do now is have building projects, building chapels, and our stake built some apartments, and he plastered those. I carried hod for him, and I always said there's two vocations. If I ever got hungry enough to do it, I'd be too weak to do, and that's pick cotton and carry hod. Boy, I was carrying them in buckets rather than carrying on my shoulder. My shoulder got so sore. And if you know a hod carrier, he's got a callus on his shoulder the size of your fist.
Do you remember the old stake leaders back then? Who was the stake president? You probably wouldn't have known because you were so young when you came down.
Yeah, but I know, and Curt, I'm really sorry. I know that their names are legend in church history. But I'm sorry, I can't remember. If I heard it, I'd say, oh yeah, that was who it was, but I can't remember their name.
What about the bishop?
Bishop Wilkinson Andrew Wilkinson was our bishop, and after he was released, I could have told you just before I said that. Bishop Stevens, was bishop for a long time.
UH or EV?
EVE. Very, very humble man. Very, very humble man. And after him was Bishop Hyde, Hyde. And that's about the time we left the area, and I don't remember.
I remember the bishop in Southgate was Magnuson.
Magnuson, Bishop Magnuson. Mm-hmm. Right, he was a bishop in Southgate. And was bishop, well, I think when was still bishop when we left there. I don't remember now, but when we went into Santa Fe Springs, it was a fellow that I'd known in Huntington Park. I was going to say he was the dad of that fellow Wilson, but it wasn't Wilson. It wasn't Carl. What was Carl's? There was about 5 brothers. Carl. What was Carl's? Larry could tell you. Like that. Carl. Oh. Can't remember, though. Sorry. No. I'm sorry, I can't remember who that bishop was over there, but then when we split off, as you know, Cottle was our bishop. And after Cottle was McEldowney, and then after McEldowney was Bishop Ray. Remember Darrell Ray? Darrell Ray. He had 10 children. You know,
Yeah.
you remember
He
Darrell?
moved back to Wyoming.
He moved back to Wyoming, yeah.
Canada.
And then I think after him was Bishop Berg, and of course we were out of the ward by then. We were up in Whittier to Bishop Frodgem. And after Bishop Frodgem was Bishop Jack. I was his first counselor.
He was a market man.
Yeah, McKeon. Jack McKeon. And then after Jack was Bishop Skinner. And I was his executive secretary. And then after Bishop Skinner was... no, I'm sorry. After McKeon was... no. They combined the 2 wards, and Carlson was the bishop. And then, no, I'm sorry, after McKeon was Joe Miller. And he was only in bishop a short time when they combined the 2 wards, released the 2 bishops, and called Carlson to be a bishop. Then after Carlson was Skinner, Bishop Skinner. I was not in the administration at all with Carlson, but I was with Skinner. I was Bishop Skinner's executive secretary, and when Bishop Skinner was released, Harry Pearson was called to be bishop, and I was his executive secretary, and then we moved up here. And you knew that Bishop Pearson fell and was paralyzed. Of course, he was released.
Now, before we finish this, I'd like you to think about something about what you'd like to say to your grandkids and to their kids after because they're going to read this as they get older. What do you want to tell them and have it in writing?
Well, I guess, Curt, I did that pretty much when I wrote the letter. I wrote it to you, to your children, and to Penny and to her children.
Did they got copies of it?
They all got copies of it. I wrote a general letter to each of them, and then I wrote a separate letter to each of you, to you and your children. Each one I wrote a different. I added to it. And I had hoped that they just remember who they are and what a name means to them, and that they would have a much happier life if they remained close to the church than they would if they did not. And I believe that with all my heart.